Welcome, everyone. We will begin the webinar on Get Paid for P&Ms the Right Way, PMCLogic Introduction. I'm Melissa Joles with RDA Impact. We have Rick Palmer, President of CompuerLogic, and Josh Byers, General Manager of Automotive Color and Supply, and they are your presenters today. The presentation will take approximately 45 to 55 minutes with questions. We are recording it and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. If you have questions during the webinar, you can type them in the chat box, bottom right of your screen, and they will be answered during the presentation. Now I'll turn it over to Josh.
Thanks, Melissa. Hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm Josh Byers. I'm the General Manager and owner of Automotive Color and Supply, PBE distributor covering Indiana and East Central Illinois, and also a member of RDA. I have lots of discussions and interactions with customers and coworkers and vendors and, about collision center paint material profitability. It's certainly a topic that comes across my desk quite often. And I've found over time that, this can be one of the more challenging parts of operating a collision repair business. Even, the most successful operators out there that I interact with find it to be a consistent challenge. So we wanted to introduce you to a software solution that you may or may not have heard about before, but hopefully this solution will make this challenge a little easier and a little more profitable for you. Today there's really three ways that I see collision centers charging for and getting paid for paint materials. The most common way by far is what I call the multiplier method, where you take a paint labor hour and multiply it by the paint labor hours on the ticket. From my perspective, I think it's antiquated. I think it's inaccurate. Rates, material rates or labor rates have not kept pace with material price increases, certainly, and that's very evident, as I'm sure you're all aware, over the last couple of years. Certainly, third-party payers also they're always looking to, in my experience, diminish and minimize paint labor hours. They're smart enough to know that they can diminish a paint labor hour. They're not only getting it on the labor, the savings on the labor, but they're getting the savings on the materials as well. So that's always a focus for them. And to me, it just plain doesn't make sense that you should be paid the same amount on a job that, say, requires a solid black color versus some red metallic that takes a limited use toner. Certainly all paint formulas have different prices, number one, but also paint formulas, you use different quantities even on the same job because of coverage differences in that formula. So oftentimes I think if you're using the multiplier method too often, I guess I would say, I'm finding collision centers that fail to achieve the profit that they desire, that they should on paint materials, and certainly it adds up over time. There's a better method out there, and that many people are started to use recently, and that's using the color software from the paint manufacturer. And that color software will calculate the cost of materials used on a job with the actual quantity that you used. And this is much more accurate than the multiplier method, and it's certainly more profitable for you, at least as it relates to liquid materials, right? But of course, we all know that liquid materials are not the only piece of the paint materials consideration. And so there's a better method out there than even that, and what I would say maybe the best method that's out there, and that's what we want to share with you today a little bit. And that's using a materials calculation software that captures not only liquids on a job, but also materials used in all the materials used in the refinish process. So, and there's a couple of those softwares out there today, but in my experience, I think Rick and his company have the best software solution, and that's PMCLogic. I believe it's the most comprehensive, accurate, and easiest to use calculation software that's out there on the market today. So I'm going to turn this over, to Rick here for the next little bit, and we're going to go into kind of maybe a little bit of an alternate universe here, where he's going to talk to me as if I was the collision center owner or manager or estimator, kind of struggling to get paid with some materials, and he's going to show us what, number one, what we need to run that software, how PMCLogic produces an accurate invoice that we can use to get paid, for the work that we've done, and how PMCLogic can audit my estimate to make suggestions on how I may be able to improve what I've written before getting to that final supplemental invoice. So Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you, but let's start with, tell me what I need in order to use your software, and show me how I can take, an estimate and say CCC and turn it into, that improved supplemental invoice.
Okay, well, thank you, Josh. I'll tell you what, you did a grand introduction, and it's kind of hard to add to what you just said because you covered the waterfront pretty well. And I'm looking forward to having this back and forth conversation a little bit. But before we go to the alternate invoice, in alternate universe, I would like to introduce myself a little bit. Let me see if my screen will change here. Just again, introduce myself again. I'm Rick Palmer, and the president of CompuerLogic. And as we get into talking about this, I think it's interesting to know a little bit about our background as a company and myself. I've been working in this industry for 40 years, collision industry, actually in the IT industry back in the days when the PCs were just being invented. And just over those 40 years, we actually wrote all the paint company systems that are out there, for all the companies with the exception of the DuPont Yada system. So we know the paint side of this thing pretty well, and also work with all the people like the 3M corporations and so forth. We've been working with just about every segment of this industry for many, many years, and have a great understanding of what's going on. We've always had the principle, and I know you do this in your business, and all of you, we want to do the right things. We want to do it for the right reason. And the hard part sometimes is to do it the right way. And when it comes to getting compensated for paint and materials, the big problem that we've had for the last 50 years that I've been sort of around is never being able to get paid for paint materials the right way. And of course, the history on that goes back to the days nobody really knew. They didn't know how much it cost. So when people in the early days with Mitchell and whatever were putting together their estimating systems in paperback form, that's how we came up with the multiplier effect of, let's just say we don't know what to charge, so let's just give somebody $10 an hour for their paint materials to cover their cost. And unfortunately, we've stayed with that antiquated, outdated method for all these years. And even though now we have a solution to that problem, which actually we developed about 20 years ago with the encouragement of the industry, particularly everybody in the industry, and the insurance companies, even though included jobbers, body shop people, said, we need somebody who can give us a true, honest, accurate invoice and we can pay off of it. And when we did work with them and came up with PMCLogic, and without getting into a long story about how we did all this money we spent and time, effort, that we could give an accurate invoice, the problem came is that the insurance companies found if you paid off of the invoice, but really what it should be compensated, it was a lot higher than what they were paying. So now we're stuck with having to do a change process, and that's very difficult. But the first thing about life, if you want to have the other person change, you've got to change first. So to change the way the industry gets paid now for the multiplier effect, and we have to start invoicing. And the good news is there's a trend that's going on right now that's with the help of a lot of other different sectors of the market. But the question is, why PMCLogic? And Josh has already said that this is something that came out. I was on a panel for CIC about a year ago, and we did a lot of work and actually traced just over the last 5 years cost of the increase in paint materials versus what the compensation factors were. And over the last 5 years, when the allowance amount was being increased from about $35, $34 an hour up to whatever it is today, that was an 18% increase over that 5 years. But over the same 5 years, the paint material costs have gone up 43%. So you can see that there's been about a 25% gap just in the last 5 years. And I know because we get information continuously from paint companies and material suppliers. Going into this year, we're looking at probably about another 7 to 10% increase in cost of paint and materials. So the why factor is, if something isn't done, if we don't change the way it's always been done in the past and keep doing it the same way, we're going to keep getting the same results. So the only solution to it is alternative is you have to give an honest and accurate invoice. Well, what makes, PMCLogic, or the first question is, what is PMCLogic? And really, PMCLogic is just a tool that you have to use to be able to negotiate and to get paid a different way. So if you have an honest and accurate invoice to work off of, then now you have an opportunity to get paid more money. Also, just as a side note, PMCLogic was designed because of its keeping track of everything you're using and to give you the proper job costing and honest and accurate invoicing. There's a lot of management reports that I can talk about at the end of the program if you're interested in what all the management features of this provide for you that are worth whatever little bit of money it costs in the front end. But we know when I'm talking to now going into this alternate world that Josh was talking about, when I talk to body shops today one-on-one and they say, I'm interested in PMCLogic or whatever, I say, well, why are you interested? What is it you want? Well, I want to be able to get paid, better by, more money on my paying materials. And I said, well, the only way you can do that is you've got to document and give it to the customer and to his insurance company what you've actually used, and they'll, more than likely pay off of it. And we're finding that to be the truth, and that's why, as you know, because you've been in the paint part of this for so long, and we work with the paint manufacturers, that we put in that program where when you mix paint on the scale, it'll generate an invoice. And as you know, more and more insurance companies now, if you start questioning, why is the cost higher for that special red color of paint versus the black, and you give them a printout off the paint mixing system, they're more than likely going to pay you for it. And because you got documentation and you got something that says, hey, this is honest and accurate information, so pay me. And so we help develop those programs for everybody, and there's being used to limited success today, but they are gaining traction in that payment process. On the material side, we have come up with that piece of it, which I'll show you in just a moment, that adds it all together. That gives you on an invoice now where you have your liquids on the top, and then it has all your material items at the end of it, and now you got an invoice that you can actually give to the customer / insurance company and say, here's all the things that I've used, and here's my price on it. Well, what makes PMCLogic different than other applications that are out there? Because we've had Mitchell RMC for many years. That was something that was developed back in the days when there was a lot of capping going on, and they just basically just put lipstick on the pig, I call it. They because the word Mitchell, and they've got some clout in the industry with the insurance companies. They were able to say, I've got a program here, and you use ours and give it to the insurance companies. They'll pay off of it because it's got our name with it. The only problem with that is it's still based off of we finish hours, and if you give a 10-hour document to the insurance company, they'll pay off it, but it's still an estimate. It's not truly accurate. But the three things that separate us is the total accuracy and the automation, and then the acceptance of it being an honest and accurate invoice. And to me, the most important thing that we've done, and it kind of keeps us out there working with everybody, is we've automated everything. Because I'm in body shops every week, probably somewhere in the country, and I know how busy you are. You don't have time to do what you need to do every day. You're dealing with customers, you're dealing with insurance adjusters, running your business. Anything that you've got to stop and do and go out and in a process that may or may not get done. So we've absolutely automated this process from the time the estimate is written by the estimator, and I'll show you this process in a moment, till the time you just hand a piece of paper to the insurance company or their customer. And we do that because we interface with all the estimating systems that are out there. We connect up with all the body shop management systems. We have programs that we've built over these last 40 years where we have interfaces with practically everyone so that we can exchange data and have all that information. So the beginning point in our system is when you write the estimate in CCC, if your estimator writes it, as soon as he closes out that estimate, and not even closing, I mean just when he closes out the system, even if he saves it, and it's not a closed job, but saves it, it immediately comes into our system and we generate the predictive estimate, which is 95 to 98% of what you'll wind up actually using in the system. So what we do is we actually scrub the estimate. We read each line item, and if you repaired the hood on this vehicle, then, or if you repaired it or replaced it, there'll be different templates. We have thousands of templates in the system that calculate the volume of materials used and what items that happen to be used, but we get that scrubbing information by reading the CCC to say if it's a structural item, frame rail, radiator support, what materials do you need, what's the volume based on it. But the most important thing to do, as soon as you write that estimate, we automatically send it through an email right back to the estimator and say, we just written this, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Or if you want to print it out, you've already set it up that it'll print something on a printer. So nobody has to press a button. Matter of fact, you never even go to PMCLogic. You just write it in CCC, and it's going to generate all this information. And we talked about accuracy just a moment. I think this is so important because really the difference between an estimate and an invoice is everything. If it's an estimate, somebody keeps saying, well, my estimate's better, than your estimate or whatever. But if it's like a restaurant, whatever you ate and drank in that restaurant, when you walk out the door, you're going to get an invoice for what you ate and drank, and there's no question about that. So in our system, there's no question that what you've used on that vehicle, the amount of paint, the paint you've used, the materials you've used is unquestionable. So then it's just a matter then either the customer / insurance company wants to either pay you for it or not pay you. And that puts you in a position to be in the high ground and say, this is what you owe me, and now if you don't want to pay it, we got to talk about it. But we generate that by all these templates that we've generated. And of course, question we get asked a lot of time, well, what about the selling prices? How do we know what it is? We actually get all the information from from the paint companies, their refinisher pricing, the people like 3M, so their selling prices, and whatever your discount is from your jobber for those items is your cost. So in our system, we set up your cost, and that obviously gives you cost reports too for each job and the cost of what you're doing in this total paint materials sector. But then you just put in what your gross profit target is, and that becomes your selling price. And that is what your invoice will reflect to be your selling price for the paint materials that you've actually used in this job. So now let's get into the alternate world that I think Josh just mentioned. That okay, you say, Rick, I've got PMCLogic. How does it work? Well, the good news is the way it works is you don't do anything. Don't do anything. You just plug it in. You write an estimate, and as soon as you get through writing the estimate, you'll get an estimate. You'll get an email. So you'll automatically get an email that'll pop up on Rick Palmer's computer and say, hey, Rick, you got this particular, we call this a line item opportunity report that says, Rick, you just wrote this estimate for, $5,800, but you've just missed an $87 opportunity over here to put these items on the CCC document. And these are items that you as a body shop owner can select that particular insurance company will pay for if you put them on CCC. Of course, everything we do when you get the system, we pre-fill a lot of these based on what the industry is getting paid off of and so forth. And within your preferences and settings, you can say, well, and you can actually set it up by insurance company. Say, well, Allstate will pay for sound deadening pads and seam sealers and some other things, but Geico only pays for this, that, or the other. You can set those all up just like you do with your CCC systems billing profiles. And if your estimator misses putting something down that they'll pay for, it'll tell you you've missed that, go back and now add it to your estimate. And while you're at it, if you do want to see in this particular example here on the email that comes to you, it'll tell you what the allowance amount that you just wrote on the estimate was $796.50. But your invoice, based off of what your selling price is for what you'll be using, should be $1,276. So right off the bat, you've got about a $500 or $600 difference in what you're going to be getting paid. But the most important thing at this point is to go back right now and add that $87 to this job, because we call that found money. You're going to get paid for that and the allowance amount both. But you may have to negotiate to get your $1,200. But don't miss out on the $87. But right at that moment, if you want to go look at the estimate itself, you just click on this little button up at the top up here, and either it'll print it out on a printer, or it'll come out as a digital format for you, or whatever you want to do. And when I said that you don't ever have to do anything, another time that we've automated this is so critical is when you convert a job from an estimate in CCC, for example, and it's the same with Mitchell and Autotex, whatever. But when you convert it from an estimate into a repair order, that's another process, because now you've got the keys, the car, you're going to be working on it, and you're going to have it in your shop. So we have a thing called a worksheet or a check sheet. And as soon as you push that button, you don't have to go tell CompuerLogic to do it or PMCLogic to do it. If you got it set up, it'll automatically go to one of your printers back in the shop somewhere where they've got other things. It'll print this check sheet out that you can then put into the job jacket. and it looks like this estimate would be here, but it'll be, I think, only showing the quantity of the items. And what we suggest, particularly when you first get the system, is you do this on every job, and it does two things. Is one, it allows your employees, when they look at what they're supposed to be using, obviously it's like a kitting situation. They go out and help them make sure they got all the materials they need when they do the job. But more importantly, at the end of the job, let me know, what do we actually use? And let the technician in the field tell you what they used and didn't use. Let them sign off on the bottom and give it back to you to do two things. One, as I mentioned to you, because this is a system that you can do anything in our system. You can change anything, add things. It's unlimited. So if you've got certain things that we gave you in a starter kit, we call it, with everything that typically people use. If you don't use the wool buff pads anymore, you just say we don't use them, and they won't be in your template. If you use something that we don't have, you can add it, and it'll be in all of your templates. More importantly, if you look back up there in a moment where we got the paint quantities, and we found that because different paint guns that people use will allow you to either spray more efficiently or not, or some painters are more efficient than others. Because of all the data that we have, we know pretty much what, for example, you should be using, say, 60 ounces of base coat on this job. So if you mix up 60 ounces of base coat and you start running out every time, whatever it is, maybe a little bit, you can say, okay, we want to change ours so that we can make it a little bit higher. Somewhere in our system, you can go just change it, and it'll be 65 ounces. But right now, the main thing is this will allow you to make those adjustments by seeing what's not exactly right and get this down from a 95% to 99% of credibility. And quite frankly, after about 2 weeks, most people never even do this anymore because it's so accurate. They still have the ability to always have an exception and do something they can. But the second reason we do this is because when you get ready, and the only time that people really ever go into PMCLogic pretty much and do anything, because it's all automated, is if they ever do want to change something. Like, for example, you need to add, say, some seam sealer that was not in there for some reason for a significant amount of money. This is the only time, Josh, that you would ever have to go to PMCLogic, click on the little icon on your desktop, it comes up, and when it comes to this quick edit button, you click on it. Here be all the jobs that are in process in the shop. You click on the one that you want to make a change to. You get this screen right here that you'd be able to go in, and all the items would be showing just like it does on that check sheet that we gave you. You go in and just change this from 9.6 ounces to 12 ounces or whatever it might be. And, you can then, at that point, print it out and have a final invoice that's 100% accurate. Now, also, this quick edit program is used for a lot of other reasons too. And again, if I was here, it'd take you an hour for me to tell you all the features we have and what we do. We just hit some of the highlights. Again, we're saying, how do you get paid? And when you get this system, you got to start changing the way that the industry has been working for the last 50 years. And that is that over the last 50 years, people have found different ways that they can get paid. The first way was being able to get line items put on the CCC and Mitchell Autotext estimates, like I mentioned before, flex additive, car covers, sound deadening pads, those things that you can slap off onto that, you're going to get paid for. Other ways we're getting paid today is, like Josh just mentioned, on the paint company systems. Now we've gotten some of the insurance companies that will start paying you off of those if you give them an invoice off the paint mixing machine. Well, a lot of people say, well, I can get paid if I've got, a printout from PPG or BSF that says, this is what we mixed. So I just need something that shows the nothing but my materials. Oh, well, that's fine. You go what we call this alternate invoice tab here, and if you click on it, it'll say, do you want to show paint or not, or whatever. So without you having to do a lot of work, you just push a button, and it doesn't show anything but the materials. And it does a lot more than that, and I won't get into all the features, but we try to take the people out of the process and get it down to where you don't have to ever spend more than 60 seconds to do anything in this system. Now, it also, at any point in time, if you want to print an invoice, you go look at the bottom down, you got the print invoices, and you can print this back out anytime you want to. So let's talk about now, how do you use it? Because when you say, what do I do to use the system? Really, the way you use it is either when you get an email, you either do something or you delete it. Or if it prints it on a printer, you either throw it in the trash can or you give this invoice off to the customer or the insurance company, that's all you got to do. So let's talk about how do you get paid. The people that are using this successfully are the customers that are saying, you know what, I'm going to change the way I do business, and that is I want to start giving this invoice to every single customer, whether I get paid or not. And by the way, don't ever, if you use PMCLogic, say this is a PMCLogic invoice, because it's not. Or if it's this PMCLogic estimate, because it's not. If you say that, then you're right back to the negotiations with somebody saying, you know, this isn't, you know, I'm coming to your restaurant and this is what I ate and drank. So this has got to be, you know, the Palmer Auto Body's invoice, and you got to believe it, and it's got to be honest and accurate, and you can work from there. So even if you don't get paid, then at least now they know how much. If it's a customer that you didn't get paid that $1,200, you only got paid $695, and you get some benefit from, hey, you know, I didn't charge you more. I told you when I took the car in, you had a $500 deductible. I work with the insurance company, and that's all you got to pay. So I couldn't get them to pay it. I wish you would pick up the phone and tell them how unhappy you are, that, you know, tell them you got to pay it and you're not happy, and that'll get me paid. And quite frankly, that's how a lot of our customers do get paid extra money. They use their customers to help them get paid. And they do also find that a lot of customers will even say, you know what, you know, I don't want you to eat it. You know, I'm going to pay you that money. So, but if you don't give it, as they say, if you never ask, you never receive. So there's no downside to you ever giving anybody an honest, accurate invoice of what you really use. So that's the number one thing. If you want to get paid, take that mindset, implement that process and procedure into your body shop, and I would guarantee you, if you don't make 10, 20, 50 times ROI on what you pay us per month, then you're not using it. So that just has to be a mandatory process. Now, at that point, I'll stop before I go in to talk about reports and other things and see, you know, if you have any questions. I've been talking pretty fast here because I know we're limited in time. So, Josh, I'll ask you and anybody else, what do you want to know?
Yeah, so just a couple things. So it sounds like there's some upfront work, right? So setting up templates or maybe are akin to, like you said, setting up profiles in the estimating systems, right? I know a lot of customers have.
May I stop you right at that question, and then I'm missing. You're right, because I say when this comes out of the system, we have worked with thousands of body shops. We got this down now that I can tell you that for the first month or two, people using it out of the box is so accurate they don't do anything. When I mentioned about that little worksheet that we put out there, when your guys in the back take that worksheet the first week or two, if there's anything they found there, that's the only time you have to go in there, and it takes just about a minute to change anything. And I think I've told you the story separately, but when we actually had one of the insurance companies that, you know, took this and put it into one of their body shops that they own and operate and whatever, after the first week, tweaking wise, the guy didn't do any tweaking to speak of, and said, you know, it was so accurate, we just quit even printing this out. So this should be out of the box 95% of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So there's not really any setup. And so when you become a customer, said, take it, do that. And if there's any little tweaking, we'll just show you how to do that. And it's not a big effort. That didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, there's not a lot of work.
You're really not operating within PMCLogic itself. It's running in the background, correct? And it's really spitting back to you either by email, or if you set it up to go to a printer, it's sending the information back to you. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a cloud-based system, huh?
Right. And so, you know, really, you know, and I think you make a good point there too, of like, this is not a PMCLogic invoice. The software is creating an invoice based off of your estimate. So if you and I write an estimate on the same vehicle, that invoice that PMCLogic is producing is going to look different, right? So I can choose to add things to my estimate that you may not, or vice versa, right? And the invoice is going to be different. So it really, truly still is my estimate. And this software is really trying to help me capture what the price and the cost of those items that I've put on my estimate, right?
That's correct. And kind of following on, when you write that, I keep using CCC's name because they're such a large, you know, they got 80 to 90% of the market share today. But it's, when I say CCC, I mean all estimating systems. They're all, you know, we work with all of them. So using CCC, for example, every time you go back and do a supplement, you know, if you go back to CCC once you bring it in and you do some more work, every time you add a part, take out a part, it completely changes ours. We're reading simultaneously what you're doing with CCC, you might say. So every time you change something, your estimate changes. And so if you take off something, it comes out. You put on something, it adds it on. Because each part of the car and everything you do is tied to one of our templates. And when you say I repaired this hood, there may be a few extra items that will be added into that list of things you're paying on that were not there if it's an OEM hood, and vice versa. So everything you do is tied to your actions with CCC or Mitchell Autotex. So if you were watching them side by side, it'd almost be changing constantly. So yeah, it maps up to exactly what you do. So if you wrote an estimate for a car and I wrote an estimate for a car, we got two different CCC estimates for the same vehicle, and you have two different, PMCLogic invoices.
Right, and I think that that's also an important point of differentiation between your software and maybe some of the other material calculators out there. Like you said, all the other material calculators that I'm aware of still, and I think you mentioned this, still are tied more or less to a refinish, the number of refinish hours that are on the ticket, right? Whereas yours is related to, hey, what panels am I fixing on this vehicle? I know the size of those panels, the surface area, and therefore I can have a more accurate estimate in terms of quantity used on that job, regardless of how many hours I've written. Is that? That's
exactly right. You can have the same exact hours, and in our system, when we get in to show it to you, I can show you a vehicle, and if it's a small vehicle or large or medium-sized vehicle, just by the VIN code, you can take the same number of hours using the same color of paint and everything, and just change the vehicle sizes and whatever, and you'll see the prices. You'll see the pricing change because of the volume. You'll see it went from 48 ounces of paint down to 36, or went from 48 to 55 just by the VIN number. And you'll see the color too. If you take the same exact car with the same exact number of hours and everything's exactly the same in our system, if you said this is just a black car, you'll have the quantity of paint might be 60 ounces, but if it's a pearl, it'll be a 3-stage, 4-stage, it'll change and go to 70 ounces, and the price will go different. So anything you do in this system, it's going to change. Change the color, will change.
And that's why I've seen your product. I guess it's just more robust than the other ones out there, right? And I think the other differentiating point that you have here is that we focus a lot on the invoice piece of it, and you're going to touch on some of the management reports that come out of the software as well. But I don't want to overlook that, because I look at it as three pieces. It's invoicing, it's auditing, and it's reporting. And then the auditing piece of it is, like you said, hey, I'm going to send you those missed opportunities. You can choose to put them on there, you can choose not to, but hey, these are out there and you probably should be doing that on this vehicle. So hopefully you're doing it. Or maybe, maybe you're doing it and not charging for it for other business related reasons. But then that sheet that you showed that follows around the repair, and I guess from my perspective, I think it's super important that collision centers over document their repair process, with pictures, with line item notes, with all sorts of things, and that auditing piece of your software, I think, certainly goes to help that. If you do put that piece of paper in the repair jacket, it is following along that vehicle. Technicians are signing off on it. I think that just creates a more of a, I guess, bulletproof file. If you ever have the need to refer to that in the future, hopefully it never gets to like a legal proceeding or anything like that. But even just in documentation with repair partners, or even with a customer that comes back, with their vehicle for some reason or another, like that would be something that I would want to pull out of the file and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, this is what we did on the car, and this is how I know this is what we did, because this is our process. Right. So
exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know, Melissa, if there's any other questions or anything. That's kind of all I had in terms of summary. If there are, then we can stop now, or we can let Rick go on to show some of the reporting piece of PMCLogic.
I don't see any questions yet, so why don't you go ahead and continue, Rick?
Okay.
Okay, good. Well, kept this one very, very small, but just this matter of fact is what the screen looks like. If you ever decided you want to go look at PMCLogic, you go click on the icon. This is what you would see, and you can go through. And matter of fact, within our system, you could find out even that, for radiator support, what the materials that we put on that one and something else, all the details. But you got different things we can do here. We got preferences and settings that every shop can set things up the way they want to when they get, emails sent to them and not, or the print on this time and another. So this is totally malleable. You can do whatever you want to with it. We got product maintenance in here. You can add items, delete items, and this sort of stuff. But that just allows anybody who's really anal to just make this 110% of what they want. But 99% of people never touch this stuff. But on the reports section, when you go in here, we have all kind of reports. We got reports that you can run based by insurance company on your profit and loss, and we call it the differences. If you've got, say, a DRP relationship and you did 200 jobs for a particular insurance company, and then they got you fixed on a certain dollar allowance amount, and they're not increasing you, you can get a report that says, okay, here's the 200 jobs we did for you last year. It'll show a sheet of every job with vehicle information. It'll show the allowance amount that they paid you versus your invoicing amount, and show the difference. And you might got paid $100,000, they should have paid you $138,000, and you can show the difference and say, hey, I've got to get got me $38 an hour right now. I need a raise. And you can use tools for that. You can do it by estimator to see. You got some estimators, and you can do profit and loss and a lot of the things you do there. But I'm going to just skip all those and come down to this KPI reports, because this is something that we've got it set up that automatically will send to the owner of the business on the first day of the month. They get reports that come out, and there's a bunch of them. They select which ones they want here. But just give us some samples of it. We do this closing report for them only because we want to make sure that we're mapping out. This particular customer, she did over the last year almost 1,900 estimates, and did ROs on about 1,500 of them. But it kind of tells them how many hours. But we do this to make sure that we're picking up all the CCC documents and not missing any. We do that one more, but that's just something they like to look at. And while we're at it, we do some calculations, based on what their average vehicle repair is, and break it down different ways for them. But this is where you get into the meat and potatoes, I call it, of your painting material. And I don't think anybody can give you this information. What these little graphs here show you is this was all the allowance amounts for the last 12 months. You can run this report for a month or a quarter, but let's say over the last year, this guy here, and this is some actual data, would have collected about $547,000 just off of allowance amounts, if that's all he got paid. Based on his target of about 45% gross profit, if he could have gotten paid the way he should be getting paid, he'd have made $784,000, which is a pretty significant amount of money. But when he finally did get paid, because we do track what you finally are paid when you close out your CCC document, it always tells you what you got paid for the paint materials. There's a line item that says if you got paid for the invoice or additional paint materials, there's a line item where you get additional money. He got paid $608,000. But then you can break it down, and we only do this because we're so used to the hourly rates kind of going along in markets and do whatever. But it shows what the allowance amount rate was in this market, about $32 an hour. And if he got paid based on his gross profit calculation, you have to make it about $47 an hour to get that. But effective rate he's got running is about $35 an hour. Then you got all kind of reports. This is one, just insurance analysis. You can see what insurance companies you're doing business with, and this is just based on nothing but this is not all of it. This is just on paint materials. What your gross profit is by insurance company, which vehicles you're working on, and what your gross profit is by vehicle. Material usage report. We have some shops now using this because they're buying a lot of materials from you as a jobber possibly, but they're not all going on the vehicle. So you might be looking around and see what's happening to those 28 boxes of gloves that were vinyl gloves that were not being used during the pandemic system. But anyway, we can go through. I can open up PMCLogic and go through a lot of those, but just to give you an idea of reports. But it's really something that you can help manage your business with. End of the day, to get to the end of this, I'm just going to get back and we'll take on more questions. If you want to do the right thing for the right reason, the right way to do it is use PMCLogic as your tool to do this. And people say, well, Rick, what does it cost, to get into this? Well, I answer, I say, well, it depends on how long you don't use it. Because every day you're not using it's costing you money. But to get started, we charge $495, to get you started. to help cover our startup fees and whatever, and to make sure we're committed and do some training. From that point on, it's $179 a month. There's no long-term contracts. You just give us a 30-day notice and you're out. There's no obligation. And where to get started, all you got to do is just go to our website, PMCLogic.com, or call us at this phone number, 800-933-6564, or send us an email. And it doesn't cost you anything to even use the application, because the steps that we take when you do this, if we put you on a trial, we just hook up to your CCC system. So, Josh, if you said, let's get going, what do I need to do? I said, well, if you're sitting at your computer right now, go to PMCLogic, and there's a little button there that says download this link. And when you download the link, it's called PMCLogic Connect. Then we now connect that up to your CCC. That takes about a minute or two. From that point on, we start sucking out the data. And all the things I just showed you, you start getting emails, you start seeing reports. Matter of fact, when you go on a trial, we'll go back with the last 30 or 60 days and bring across your old jobs that you've worked on, and actually can show you some of those reports that I just showed you, what your gross profits and all are. So that's all there is to it. If you go to our website, that's what it looks like, and just go to that little button that says click here to schedule a free trial. Doesn't cost you anything, just do it, and you can call us up and make an appointment and just go out there and look at the availability and say, yep, I want to do it next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We'll turn you on, you can play with it, look at it, we'll show you how to use it. And then at the end of the 7 days, if you decide you want to become a customer, then you start paying us, and then you can quit at any time. And I think that's just about it. So at this point,
we appreciate that offer. I mean, back to your reporting just real quick. I'm somebody that tries to manage my business as well as I can through data, and I believe I've got a pretty good feeling about how my business operates every day. But I still, when I rely on the data, I still find surprises, and there's that better inform my decisions going forward. And there's just tons of information and data. From my perspective, like the cost of the program is the reporting is worth the cost of the program in itself. Needless to say, the amount, if a customer's a collision center is going to use this consistently and is going to use the invoices to get paid, certainly that $100 and whatever dollars, however much a month, they're going to make that back on just very few estimates, right? So I definitely think it's an investment to absolutely consider. It's an investment that that I'm pretty confident will make customers more money, certainly better inform their decisions going forward, and even better able to train estimators and things like that by showing them reports of hey, Joey over here, this is his numbers for the month, and Susie over here, this is her numbers, and and trying to work out the differences there, and try to get everybody kind of up on the same level. So one other question I have, and I'll turn it back to Melissa. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say just talking about that. One of the first things people do is that line item opportunity. You talk about you have two estimators right there because you run reports by estimators. You can see just in a month's time, you got one estimator that didn't put $1,000 with these line items on their estimates they wrote, and another one missed $500. But just that alone, just those little $35 and $50 on these jobs, 2 or 3 jobs, you've already paid the cost of this product. I mean, it's just on the line items before you even have to go to an insurance company and say, give me more money.
Right.
So it pays for itself. That's what I say. When people say, what does it cost? I say, well, depends on how long you don't use it. So anyway, go back to what you're saying. I'm sorry.
The last question I have before I turn it back to Melissa, if there's any other questions or to close out. So support resources, training. I heard you say that during the free demo or during the demo period, somebody will kind of show us how to use it. I mean, there doesn't look to be a whole lot of intricacy involved in the use of it, but if I've got a problem, 30 days down the road, 60 days down the road, like tell me what your support resources are, going forward.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. That's great. We're old fashioned. You call us on the telephone, you'll get somebody to answer the phone. You don't get robots, and you don't get push this button. Somebody will answer the phone. If they don't, the worst case is somebody will say, I've got all of our support people. They'll call you back, and they'll call you back in a few minutes, if you don't get somebody immediately. And we just spend whatever time it takes. So if you get on the phone with us and got questions, we spend sometimes, an hour or two, some other folks. It's one-on-one. And the good news is today with the technology we have, obviously, through our team viewers and whatever, we're looking at what you do. So we're sitting there and you're sitting at your table and watching you and go through the system and pushing the keys. And if you say, well, gee, how do if I want to, for example, I'm buying some parts of some I don't know, I'll just make an example of some car wash soap from my uncle who makes it, and I don't have a place in here to have that car wash soap in there. We'll go show you how to add it in your inventory and to stick it in there with pricing and all that, so it'll show up on your invoice. Just any question you've got. I hate to sort of say this, but I tell people when people ask the question, "Hey, Rick, can I?" I say yes. Now, what's the question? Because it's just about that capability in our system.
Yeah, is there any additional cost to that support, or is that built into the monthly fee there?
That's built into the $179 a month.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Melissa, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, I do have a question. Is the usage based upon recommendation of products used, or is there a scanner that allows you to scan products out?
Well, that's a good question too. We actually have a program that's built into this too. It's called CompuerLogic, and that's something we sell. That's like, in fact, we developed a lean tech system for CC, what's it, 3M is required, whatever. We've been doing inventory control for years. But we interface with anybody's got anything. So even in our system, if people want to have cabinets, and that's a good point. I didn't mention this too. We interface like with the paint mixing systems when I was telling you earlier that when you mix paint on the scale, when you mix the paint on the scale, we will actually, when you put our system in, we do connect you up to PPG, BSF, whatever system you've got. When you mix that paint, it actually brings those numbers over onto this system. So you don't have to print that document out of PPG or BSF or whoever Exxon Nobel system, because we've already got it and it's built right in here and overrides our 60-ounce projection and say it's a 65 or it's 44, whatever. Same way true. If somebody's got barcode scanners and said, hey, I want to go to cabinets and barcode scan this, and this, when they put that RO number in there, if we're hooked up interfaced with it, then it'll actually override and add that automatically into our system. So yeah, if you got scanners and things like that and doing other things, those items, if we hook up with that particular company, will actually override. And again, we will take people completely out of the system. We don't want you to have to manually go back in here and enter it. So that's a good question, Melissa. So if you do have barcode scanning capabilities and whatever company you're working with, if they're not somebody already on our list, as long as they're willing to work with us and just give us the output file, then we can make it happen.
Okay. Anybody else? I don't see any other questions. I will follow up, and Rick, I will send everybody your information if that's okay, and they can follow up with you directly.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, it'll be fine. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I thank you for taking the time to be here today. And again, I tell people we're not trying to sell PMCLogic. We got a tool here, and we want to support those customers that want to use a tool. And just come see us, and we'll work with you limitlessly to help you get paid more money.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. So with that, let everybody go. Thank you, Rick, so much, and Josh. And Rick, we appreciate the offer you put out there, and I'll follow up with an email and let everybody know about that.
So great. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch with future training opportunities. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.